This is a brief introduction to executive dysfunction and work. I'm Dr. Leonard Mat with Epic Rehab. Executive function is the ability to integrate component cognitive abilities to produce complex performance. I like to emphasize integrate because this is a crucial issue for occupational therapists. It's even better to use the word orchestrate to consider the abilities that occupational therapists tap into as the person attempts to perform a complex task or activity. It's this ability to orchestrate that lies at the heart of executive function. Depending on age, the human brain has between 85 billion and 120 billion neurons, supported by about 10 times that many glial cells. As we look at the cerebral cortex, we see neuron cell bodies packed closely together. Extending below the cell bodies are axons. Neurons can have up to 30,000 connections extending from their axons, with each neuron averaging about 10,000 connections. This early diffusion tensor image depicts the fiber bundles extending from the neuron cell body. The disruption of these axonal connections by concussion, stroke, physical insult, or illness interferes with cognitive component orchestration. The inability to orchestrate component cognitive abilities produces executive dysfunction. Executive dysfunction creates several disabling limitations. I want to present three of the most important to you in this video lesson. The first important disability factor produced by executive dysfunction has to do with diminished productivity. Slower cognitive processing speed diminishes productivity. Limited span of cognitive coordination limits the ability to handle complex processing and diminishes productivity. A second important disability factor produced by executive dysfunction has to do with safety. The inability to maintain attention produces safety problems. The inability to appropriately handle interpersonal disruption produces safety problems. This leads to the third important disability factor produced by executive dysfunction. The inability to discern subtle interpersonal cues leads to interpersonal disruption. The inability to inhibit emotional reactivity leads to interpersonal disruption. As an introduction, we can think in terms of executive dysfunction broadly as occurring in the metacognitive and productive arena, and executive dysfunction with regard to emotional and behavioral self-control. There are 5 metacognitive types of executive dysfunction: initiation of tasks and ideas, working memory and attention span, planning and organizing tasks and activities, monitoring tasks for mistakes and completion, organizing materials and resources to implement tasks and ideas and activities. There are 4 major emotional behavioral types of executive dysfunction: difficulties with inhibiting impulsivity and distraction, limitations in ability to shift from one task or approach to another, limited emotional control and reactivity, diminished self-monitoring of behavior. Now, I don't want to overwhelm you with data, but I would like to provide you with one simple case study. This is a 22-year-old female I will call Judy, who experienced a concussion while playing basketball. She returned home from college to live with her parents and came to see me 3 months after the incident. Judy's father and mother completed the brief on a blind and independent basis. Here we have the profiles of her father's rating of Judy. The profile uses a T-score, which is a normative score based on Judy's age, compared to other people in their late teens and early 20s. On the left side of the profile are the major emotional behavioral types of executive dysfunction. On the right side of the profile are the major metacognitive types of executive dysfunction. Judy's father rates her as having somewhat elevated executive dysfunction, but generally within the normal range for emotional behavior. Conversely, he rates her very dysfunctional for all but one area of metacognition. Judy's mother rates her daughter much higher on the emotional behavioral areas of executive dysfunction than her husband did. Her ratings of Judy on the metacognitive types of executive dysfunction are similar to her husband's ratings of Judy. Let's compare the two. The first thing to notice is that the blind and independent ratings done by the mother and father track each other quite well. This is a crucial indicator of the reliability of observation measures, and one of the reasons I like the brief. Although the brief does have 4 reliability indicators built in, using it on a blind and independent basis is extremely useful. Before we conclude this lesson, I need to say something about the importance of the occupational therapy approach to evaluation of executive dysfunction. OTs have been addressing executive dysfunction for more than 30 years, led by the work of Dr. Carolyn Baum and Dr. Dorothy Edwards, my former colleagues at the Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis program in occupational therapy. Carolyn and Dorothy developed the Kitchen Task Assessment, a simulation of activities of daily living sensitive to mild cognitive impairment in early senile dementia. The KTA provides basic structure by leaving room for latitude in executive function as the person undertakes the task. This allows the KTA to collect information about basic metacognitive components. The approach that Carolyn and Dorothy took in the KTA has greater efficacy for real-world tasks than does neuropsychological testing because it provides less structure. Lower levels of structure force the evaluee to provide executive function. In contrast, neuropsychological testing of component cognitive function is much more highly structured and standardized, leaving fewer opportunities for the evaluee's discretionary behavior. It's the discretionary behavior that we're interested in as indicators of the evaluee's available executive function. It's not that the neuropsychological data are useless, but that the neuropsychologist's strict focus on reliability has been necessary to discern very subtle differences that indicate underlying pathology. This is often called the bottom-up approach to the evaluation of cognitive impairment that allows inference about brain pathology, first developed by Ward Halstead and Ralph Reitan at the University of Chicago in the mid-1950s. It has been a crucial strategy for the ongoing development of neuroscience, but it does have limitations that show up when we try to use neuropsych data to predict work disability. Although neuropsychological testing is important, IQ is not a useful indicator of executive dysfunction. This was the finding of a study that I did a few years ago. And so in conclusion, it's important to recognize that neuropsych tests are just too structured to measure the full range of work-relevant executive dysfunctions. Occupational therapists can provide work simulations that are important and necessary supplements to neuropsychological test batteries. And finally, I'd like to point you to a useful resource presented by my friend and colleague Tanya Percy, a workshop on cognitive functional capacity evaluation available through Matheson Education and Training Solutions. Thanks very much for your time and attention. Take care now.